The Chicago Digital Accessibility and Inclusive Design Meetup presents WCAG 2 Perceivable with Dennis Deacon.
So tonight we're talking about Perceivable, WCAG 2.0 for designers and developers. This is the URL for this presentation. It's there live now, and you can always go back there after this event. This URL will also be on the final slide, so if you don't get to write it all down now, you can write it down then. I originally had scheduled this to cover all of WCAG in one event, and oh my goodness, I don't know how I'm going to get this into 1 hour. So the way I foresee this is, and we'll get into it more as we get into some of the slides, but WCAG is like the World Book Encyclopedia or Wikipedia. It's huge. And there's no way that you're ever going to know everything, but as long as you get the high-level details and you know where everything is, you can always refer to it. So hopefully what you'll do is walk away today having a better understanding, at least with regards to Perceivable, the first principle, what's involved, what's covered, and then you'll be able to go out and do some further research on your own. So tonight's agenda, what is WCAG? The first principle, which is Perceivable. And within there, we have text alternatives for non-text content, alternative for time-based media. Does anyone know what time-based media would be? Just go ahead and shout it out. Video. Video? Oh. Seth, show this man the door. No, just kidding. No, that would not be a time-based. But I can see how you would think that, though. So I'm not going to totally discredit that. That's an no, that's covered by WCAG, but not in Perceivable. So just so you know, we are going to touch upon that. I could tell you stories about timeout sessions. Oh my goodness. But yeah, but that's not included as part of time-based media. Okay. Flexible content, contrast of content. The other principles we'll be covering, we're hopefully going to cover Operable, which is very more heavily around developers as well as UX. We hope to have that scheduled for June. Understandable will probably be this fall, maybe September. And then Robust has one item. And I wouldn't ask you all to come out just for one item. So what we'll do for that is we'll cover Robust, and then we'll summarize what we've covered with all these other sessions. So how will this be presented? WCAG is very dry. If you read it, you're going to fall asleep. I'm just telling you right now. It's very text heavy, very text based. So, and there's a lot of bullets. So don't fear the bullets. I know you're in Chicago, but don't fear the bullets. There's going to be plenty of code examples, plenty of design examples, and plenty of tools and resources in this presentation. And of course, plenty of my tacky jokes. Because I'm human, of course. So what is WCAG 2.0? This is the official definition. It's a definition of how to make web content more accessible to people with a wide range of disabilities, including visual, auditory, physical, speech, cognitive, language, learning, and neurological. That's a whole mouthful there. It's made up of 4 principles, which tonight you're here for Perceivable, but there's also Operable, Understandable, and Robust. The guidelines which support those principles, which there's 12 of them. Those are the basic goals that you should work towards. The success criteria, which there's 61 of them, as you can see, this is multiplying as we go deeper and deeper. But there's 3 levels of conformance for the success criteria. So I just want to stop and talk a little bit about that. If you think of it, if you have a website and you add alt text, your site is now more accessible. Is it totally accessible? No. But it's more accessible to a degree. So think of these conformance levels, A, AA, and AAA, as levels of accessibility. Level A is very basic. I mean, literally alt text, color contrast, things like that. The section 508, before it was refreshed, was closer to level A than anything else. It has been refreshed now to be more compliant with level AA. AA conformance is actually the world standard now for accessibility. The airlines in the United States are mandated to be WCAG 2 AA compliant. Most businesses, like your financial institutions, your higher ed institutions, they need to be level AA compliant. AAA, good luck with that. When you see some, and so what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to cover A and AA. I'm going to breeze through AAA, making probably snide remarks as I go along, because some of them are just, they're not ridiculous, but they're, when you think about your work, they're almost impossible. You might be able to do a few on a page, but site-wide, forget about it. And then techniques. There's 383 techniques to be accessible. So as you can imagine now, with all that information, WCAG 2 can be overwhelming. I mean, if you printed WCAG out, and you can, I don't advise it. We need all the trees we can have. WCAG itself is 36 pages. How to meet accessibility, how to meet WCAG is 44 pages, additional. Understanding WCAG is a separate section, is 230 pages. Techniques and failures to meet WCAG is 780 pages. That's a total of 1,090 pages, printed pages, that you need to learn by Friday. Yeah, that's not going to happen, trust me. So again, in tonight's session, you're going to learn on a high level what's involved, and then you're going to be able to take away some of those learnings, as well as be able to delve further in, as you go through your work. Yes, there's a WCAG 2.1, believe it or not. It just came out February 28th of this year. It's not a new version. It just adds to 2.0. It basically focuses on 3 different areas. Users with low vision, users with cognitive or learning disabilities, and accessibility of mobile devices. WCAG 2.0 came out in 2008. Smartphones were just starting to catch on. So WCAG 2 really doesn't cover mobile at all. We've had to adapt it, you know, think about how does this apply to mobile. So WCAG 2.1 tries to start addressing some of those items. We're going to cover this at a very high level. We're not going to go too deep because many of these things are brand new. Most of them are just proposed. When you see some of them, you'll see, well, how are we going to do that? So realize that while this has just come out, you know, think about a year or two before it starts to gain steam, and that you'll actually start applying this. So WCAG 2.0 in baby steps. First of all, we have the 4 principles as stated. We have perception, operable, understanding, and robust. If you ever need to remember what the principles are, they spell out POUR. This is something that's been drilled into my head, and to be honest, I've never, I mean, it helps. I mean, I go, okay, what's you? What's you? Usable? No, that's not it. Typically, U and R are the ones I can't remember, but you know, perception and operable I can sort of get. But we're going to be covering just perception in this particular event. So perception. Information and user interface components must be presentable to users in ways that they can perceive. So what is perception to you? What are the things that you would think apply to something being perceived? Anyone?
Based on the sense. I declined with one.
Okay. So the senses. You must have seen my slides. So. You were looking at them on your phone, I know. So sight, vision, yes. Hearing, auditory. Okay, so if you're watching a video, if you can't hear, you got to have those captions, or else all you do is see someone flailing their arms and you have no idea why. Touch. So here's an interesting thing. You think, well, we don't have, I understand touch screens, but how does touch enter into this? Many blind people, true, exactly. Many blind people use what's called a refreshable Braille keyboard. So basically what happens is, as they refresh the screen, they're blind, so they don't use a monitor. They feel the content. As you know, Braille is a bunch of dots, raised dots. And these raised dots refresh as he or she navigates the page. They feel it, and then they'll do whatever data entry they need to do, and then they'll read some more by reading the keyboard. By the way, those things are like $1,500 on sale. It's ridiculous. Smell, we don't have smell-o-vision on digital yet, and we don't have taste. So these three senses are key to the digital landscape. So in perception, the guidelines are text alternatives, time-based media, adaptable, and distinguishable. So text alternatives. Provide text alternatives for any non-text content. Can anyone name non-text content?
Photos, videos.
Photos, videos, okay.
All text.
Clip art. There's going to be a lot of cats tonight, okay, just so you know. Even animated ones, I apologize right now. And they're jaggy, they got the jaggy. So if you're looking for high quality clip art, forget about it. You came to the wrong place. Photos, to your point. Charts. Imagine what's the alt text for a chart. Audio players. There's my guy. Super jaggies. Video, such as the giraffe. And maps. At United Airlines, one of our infamous ones are the terminal maps. We countered that by putting an invisible table on the page with the same information. Works. So techniques. On a high level, images that communicate information must provide a text alternative. Images that are for design purposes only do not need to provide a text alternative. So there's two methods of implementing images on the web. Primary methods. I only say that because Seth will probably say, what about that? I hadn't thought about that. But you have inline images, you have background images. Okay? So inline images. Inline images, for all you non-coders, are images where the code references that image directly on the page, directly in the code. You have an image tag. You can also have an SVG tag, which is gaining prominence nowadays. So the inline image tag. All inline image instances must provide an alt attribute, and I'm going to hammer this. Every inline image must have an alt attribute. The value of that attribute depends on the image's context. Okay? So if you sweep your sites, if you have images, inline images that don't have an alt attribute, add it. We'll worry about the value in a little bit. So here's an image without alt attribute. We have a cat here. Here's our code for it, just the reference to the cat image. So a screen reader is going to read graphic img/cat.jpg. Well, thankfully here the file name gives some sense of what this image might be, but that's not always the case. We've all seen image names that are 256 characters in cryptic code from a CMS. So don't do this, because this really frustrates screen reader users. Okay? Here's an example of an image with alternative text. Here's the alt attribute. There's the value. A cat looking out the window. A screen reader would read graphic, a cat looking out the window. Very self-explanatory. Fairly easy to do. This is the low-hanging fruit of all accessibility. If you do this, you have already reached first base, rounding towards second. Hopefully you're all into baseball, like I am. Here's an example of an image with no alternative text description. It's basically design. It's not communicating anything in this instance. Alt, quote, quote, it's empty value. What happens when a screen reader reaches that? It'll just skip over the image. That's exactly what we want it to do. It's there just for flair, just for, to enhance something, but it's not communicating anything uniquely. Okay, inline SVG. Two ways of implementing it, either referencing it as an image in the image tag, or else inline SVG. So again, just like an inline image, just alt cat. Okay. Now, if you have inline SVG, you got to figure out how to describe it, because it doesn't actually have an alt attribute. So in this case, we use aria labeled by. Aria is one of the hottest things for developers to use. Overuse. Again, it always happens, got out of a meeting today, someone recreated a table with divs, used aria every which way to make it, yeah, but look it's a table. It's like, it's not a table. There's no table tag. So in this case, you would have your SVG, aria labeled by the ID that actually contains the title. And you do this because there's different ways to actually access this information. So it may seem a little bit duplicative, but it's really not. It's really necessary, at least today. CSS background images. So typically when you have a background image, it's not communicating anything that needs to be communicated to assistive technology like a screen reader. Okay? It doesn't offer any, the background CSS, the background property for CSS does not offer any type of alternative text. So again, you would just put imagery that is for more design, not communicating information. As a remediation exercise, which we did find ourselves doing at United, you can add either screen reader text or an aria label on the container where that background image is. And that will work. Who here knows what when I say screen reader text, what screen reader text is? Raise your hand. Okay, very few. So screen reader text is text that's on the page that's visibly hidden, but available for assistive technology. And it's all using CSS to do this. So you might have something like this. We have the I tag used for icons and imagery left and right on the web today. Within there, you would put a span with a class of visually hidden. And let's say if it's a check mark, well, nothing there says that that it means included. but here you can put the visually hidden text in there. It won't display, it'll still display your check mark, but it'll be communicated to the assistive technology that this means included. This is a typical CSS code for this type of information. It's really just taking it, putting it in line, and making it 1 pixel by 1 pixel and clipping it and doing all the various tricks to ensure that it's not displayed visually. ARIA label. So again, if you got your container, you got your background image, if you have to communicate something, you can use ARIA label to provide that type of information. So now we learned how. Let's talk about when you would use alt text. This is a great resource by the W3C. Basically, it's a decision tree. You go through these questions to ask yourself, in this context, does this make sense to add alt text or not? Let's see here. Does this image contain text? So if the image contains text, you're going to want to add the text that's in that image. So think about advertisements. If you got an ad banner, our website famously earn 50,000 miles when you get a Mileage Plus award card. You would want to put this in the alt text for that particular image. So in this case, if you have an image and the text is duplicated nearby, you can go ahead and leave that alt attribute as empty. If the text is there just for visual effect, let's say if you have, I'm trying to think of a scenario like this. If you had the word win and it was in a weird perspective, it was on a flag, let's say. Maybe that's the case where you would not need to put alt text on that. It just really depends on your situation. Not present anywhere else, then you would go ahead and add the text that's on the image as your alt text. Is the image used in a link or button, and would it be hard or impossible to understand what the link or the button does if the image wasn't there? No? You just continue on. Yes, you use the alt attribute to communicate the destination of the link or action taken. So again, going back to the idea of advertisements, maybe it's a case where you say advertisement by Chase or advertisement by Hertz. Does the image contribute meaning to the current page or context? No, you just continue on to the next. Yes, and it's a simple graphic or photograph. Use a brief description of the image in a way that conveys that meaning in the alt attribute. If yes, and it's a graph or complex piece of information, include the information somewhere else on the page. The scenario I gave a little while ago, the airport terminal maps. We have the information elsewhere on the page. It's hidden visually, but it's there for the screen readers. And it shows content that is redundant to real text nearby. Go ahead and use an empty alt attribute. Is the image purely decorative or not intended for the user? Use an empty alt attribute. Is the image's use not listed or it's unclear? I'll be honest, alt text I thought was going to be the stupid easy part of accessibility. I've been doing accessibility for about 3 years. Alt text is actually quite hard if you're striving for quality. To know the scenarios where you should have alt text, it's not as clear-cut as you may think, at least on an e-commerce website. It does take practice and doing it over and over until you start realizing certain patterns. There's exceptions to the alternative text criteria, and that is for certain other instances of images. So for instance, and we don't do this as often as we used to, but let's say if you have an image used as a submit button, then obviously there's a way to provide alternative text for that. Time-based. This is sort of covered in guideline 1.2, but basically you would provide alternative text that describes what is this. Like in this case, it's an audio player. What is this audio going to be? What is this about? Is it a podcast? Is it a song? A test. I've had to deal with this recently. It's very difficult because a lot of times, if it's a test, you can't put the alt text as straightforward as you may think because you might be giving away the answer. Okay, so this is actually quite a difficult one to deal with. Sensory, you know, to be honest, this one I haven't quite figured out yet because to me images are very visual. So I'm trying to think of the other instances, the other sensories that might apply to this. CAPTCHA. CAPTCHA is nothing but evil. Google's trying. Now all you have to do is hit that checkbox because it's watching you. So there's good and bad in that. But if you think of it, for someone with visual disabilities, having lines and you know the apartment number on a brick wall of a building, and you're supposed to identify what it is, it's very difficult. Very difficult. Decoration, formatting, invisible. You know, in this case, you just forget about it. You know, it's just alt null. You don't have to provide alternatives for that. Okay, any questions on alt text? Everyone, are you all still here? Okay, are you all? Okay, yes.
So alt text is the alt attribute with the actual text string specified thereafter. There are other alt attributes beyond just having a text string?
It's typically a text string. You would not use it in the case of referencing text elsewhere. There is a, what's it, long desk that's supposed to reference another page that has the longer description. You know, except for museums that have artwork and such, I cannot think of another, you know, scenario where that might come into play. Yes, Seth?
So I tell people, don't be confused by text alternative and alt text. Text alternative means you have a variety of different methodologies to convey what you visually can't see. Alt text is the attribute only of an image.
Trying to throw the mic over to you. So don't confuse. Okay, let me try to restate that for everyone. Alternative should not be confused with alt text. There is a difference. Okay. Yeah, and
So like, for instance, you could have a paragraph of text describing the image, but that would be the text alternative to the image. You don't have to use an alt tag or an attribute of
Right.
the image. Whereas if you have like a graph or a chart or an SVG, you can create a text alternative in different ways and accomplish the same criteria.
So if you accomplish it in the body copy somehow, like you describe what the image is or what the graph is for or your map is for, then you don't necessarily have to try to accommodate it in the actual alt.
Yeah,
So-
it could be like a caption, or it could be like, you know, something like that. Yes, I mean, there's a lot of gray area, but more or less, a lot of people get confused with the word text alternative with alt text, and that's not the
Agreed. Yeah, another place, you know, I said terminal maps. Another place where we see this is infographics. Unless you can turn that into HTML, you got to have that same content in a text format somewhere else on the page.
That was actually something I was going to add. What about animated, like HTML, and you have animated elements coming up the screen, and it depends on scroll?
Let's talk about that after.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, oh God, that's very complex. Yeah, and so I'm going to keep moving here only because you guys don't know how much more I got here. Time-based media, I'm actually going to fly through the bullets. Hold your applause, please. I want to get to the examples, which I actually think that some of the examples are pretty cool. So that's why I want to get to that. So, so success criteria for time-based media. You got audio only and video only pre-recorded. This gets really detailed. Captions pre-recorded. Audio description or media alternative pre-recorded. Captions live, like this event tonight. Audio description pre-recorded. Sign language pre-recorded. I have an example of that. It's pretty cool. Extended audio description. I had to look that up because I didn't understand. When I saw the example that I included in this presentation, I thought, whoa, I didn't even know anyone did it. It's an example video that explains it, but I don't, do you know if there's a lot of usage of that, where they actually stop the video and get the description in?
The most widely disseminated version of that is Scribe, where anyone can add an audio description to a YouTube video, and they have two methods of doing it. One is called extended, where at the point that you insert the description, the video pauses while the description.
Okay, yeah. And I'm going to show an example of that. I just looked at the time. Boy, I got to speed up here. So I am going to start flying through this to get to the examples, to get to the good stuff here. So media alternative pre-recorded, audio only live. So audio only and video only pre-recorded, except when, and mind you, I had to reread this stuff 3 or 4 times to think, wait, I misunderstood what this really meant. Except for when the audio or video is clearly labeled media alternative for text. Pre-recorded audio only. An alternative for the time-based media is provided that presents equivalent information for pre-recorded audio only content. Podcast. Interview. Things like that. Pre-recorded video only. So think of this, a video only, time-lapse camera, a cam where there's no sound. Either an alternative for the time-based media or an audio track is provided that presents equivalent information for pre-recorded video-only content. So that actually was a eye-opener because I had made some assumptions that actually were not accurate. Captions. Captions are provided for all pre-recorded audio content in synchronized media. There we go. I want you to pay attention to, why do I keep doing that? Oh, there we go. I'm pressing a button here that's causing it. I'm not sure why. I want you to pay attention to the level of accessibility. So this is single A. Okay, so this is basic. Captions are provided for all pre-recorded audio content in synchronized media, YouTube videos. Okay? Audio description or media alternative pre-recorded. An alternative for time-based media or audio description of the pre-recorded video content is provided for synchronized media. Captions live, like this tonight. Captions are provided for all live audio content in synchronized media. Audio description pre-recorded. Audio description is provided for all pre-recorded video content in synchronized media. How many of you have ever watched movies, let's say on Netflix or something, and turned on audio description? Isn't that cool? I actually also get into, watching the captioned versions of things until my wife tells me to stop because she can't stand it. She actually, okay, my wife was supposed to be here to help out. She didn't. Just so you know, she has turned on captions using Comic Sans. I think it's to keep me from using captions. So, sign language pre-recorded. Sign language interpretation. is provided for all pre-recorded audio content in synchronized media. Notice it's level AAA. Okay, I actually have an example of that. It's pretty cool. Extended audio description pre-recorded, where pauses in foreground audio are insufficient to allow audio descriptions to convey the sense of the video. Extended audio descriptions is provided for all pre-recorded video content in synchronized media. This is also AAA. Media alternative, pre-recorded. I'm going to start flying through these because, you know, they get so complex here. Alternative for all pre-recorded synchronized media and for all pre-recorded video-only media. Audio-only live concert, radio concert, I guess. Okay, here's where we have some demos. So for those of you who have attended past meetups, you've heard me mention this accessible player called Able Player. These are a couple of demos of Able Player in action. So this is an audio file with a transcript. So for those who are hard of hearing or can't hear, this is their way to obtain the information. Watch the transcript. Okay, not going to go through. Trust me, you're not missing anything. But as you see, the transcript highlights the lyrics that are being sung at the present time. What else? We have video transcript. This is similar, but this is what this looks like.
You want these people. They order your products, sign up for your services.
So not only do you have the captions here, you have the text highlighted in transcript. You might wonder why you need both. Well, the captions are not accessible by a screen reader or a refreshable Braille keyboard. So this would provide additional coverage for people who need that. Okay, this is one of my favorites. So this is video with sign language. As you remember, this is a AAA compliance item.
You want these people. They order your products, sign up for your services, enroll in your classes, read your opinions, and watch your videos.
So as you can imagine, you know, most people understand text, but there's some people who are more comfortable with sign language. Or maybe there's instances where someone's only comfortable with sign language. This allows them to gain that information. Okay.
The highlighting of the transcript would be covered over by the video. Is that normally happen?
Actually, no. For that example, I should have turned off the transcript as not to confuse things. But yeah, if this were a full-size page, you could actually drag and drop the transcript over here, the sign language over here. So not in this constrained view, but yeah, you could have both of those options running. So this is an example of extended audio description. Oh, okay, didn't know I was going to do that. And we're live, folks. Try this again. Oh.
And he sits in the rainforest grooming the fur of a baby tube that is lying in front of it. One foot in the air supported by the adult tube. A man in a green khaki shirt is positioned in front of the roots of a large moss-covered tree in the rainforest.
One of the most amazing moments I remember was when Freddie was lying down on the forest floor and went to sleep.
A baby tube is lying on its back in the arms of a sleeping adult tube on the forest floor.
And he was cradling Oscar in his arms. Oscar was lying on his back. And he was looking up at the canopy.
The forest
So this is the first time I ever experienced extended audio description preparing for this presentation. I just thought that that was like so cool.
Empty, filled with big green leaves in dappled sunlight.
Okay, stop. Any questions about time-based media? Going once, going twice. Yes.
I have a question for people who are deaf. So for the sign language aspect of it, is that pre-recorded or is that? I mean, I would assume
It's
pre-recorded.
it's a video,
Yeah.
and to the point, if you reread those different criteria, so basically in this case, the recording of the sign language does not need a text alternative because it itself is an alternative to another instance of media. So, you know, it's funny, preparing the series, I looked at it as a way to dig deeper into WCAG, and you know, each one of these principles I could just spend, it could be my full-time job just digging in and learning more about these things. So, but anyways, oh God, I literally have 17 minutes to finish. So this is going to be fun. Adaptable, creating content that can be presented in different ways. So the success criteria, info and relationships, meaningful sequence, and sensory characteristics. Info and relationships. What's the first thing you think about when you think info and relationships with regards to web pages? Anyone? Headings? Okay, that's good. What else? Bless you.
Taxonomy?
Possibly. I was sitting there going, okay, stretch. Possibly in certain ways. Maybe we'll be able to touch on that. Anything else? Yes and no. For me, I always call it semantics. Okay, so information structure relationships conveyed through presentation that can be programmatic. It's late, folks. Programmatic. Thank you. I'm just going to point to y'all because that word comes up several times here. Determined or are available in text. So think of it this way. Oh, stop that. Semantic web standard space HTML. And there's in the slides, there's actually a link to a great article on this. Basically what this means is coding semantically. So if we want a heading, we don't just say font size 24 pixels, blue, you know, we don't do that. We give it an H1 or we give it an H2. We call it what it is.
So it's like using styles in Quark or something.
I would say using markup. It's the separation between the markup and the styles.
So like articles, sections are articles.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, dividing the
Sections are
style.
articles.
Sections, articles. So in HTML5, so techniques. And again, because most of you are going to be familiar with this, you just might not realize how it's applied here. Use paragraphs or use a P tag for paragraphs. Don't use break tags, which are actually all over our site at work. Use list tags instead of break, you know, putting a dash because it looks good. Don't use a table for layout. Use it for tabular data. If you're going to use data tables, have a caption. Put in table heading cells and use the scope attribute to determine what that heading is applied to. Oh, here we go. Another can of worms. Use the A tag for links with an href. Did you know that if you have an A tag that doesn't have an href, it's not focusable? A tag should be used for navigation. It can run a script in addition to, but that should not be the primary function of the link. Use button tags to trigger actions and scripts. Don't use non-semantic elements such as divs or spans for links or buttons. There's a plethora of articles out there about that. Just do a Google search on links versus buttons. And in fact, Marcy Sutton has an article on that that is quite good. However now, with this said, think about custom controls. We're actually using non-semantic markup to perform the same functionality as links and buttons. So the key is, you know, it can work. I mean, I can go to visit a website and this functions. I click on this button, it performs an action. When I look at the code, it's a div. How did they do that? Well, they had to bake it all in. It's a lot of extra work. Sometimes it's necessary. If you're using frameworks like Angular and Ember and such, there's likely a reason why you need to do that. However, whenever possible, try to use the holistic tags that we have. So for instance, here's an anchor tag with an href. This continue link here. Screen reader reads link continue. And they can interact with it using the enter key. The continue button is a button. Screen reader reads it as button continue. The user knows that they can press the space bar to interact with it. What happens here when we use a div? Screen reader says continue. It's not focusable. You can't interact with it because the screen reader user doesn't know what to do. It's not focusable. There's no role stating what it is. You'd have to bake all that in. It's a lot of extra work. Not saying it's not that you should never do it, but always think, do I have to do this? That's the link to the article that I just mentioned. Meaningful sequence. I'm literally having meetings at work on this today. So if you were to code this, how would you code this? What would you expect the navigation of this to be? Anyone? So package 1, then the content. Package 2, then the content. Today, it's package 1, package 2. List with 2 items, free room upgrade. A list item, late checkout. But what does this apply to, package 1 or package 2? It's because it's coded like that. They're actually not related to one another. That's where the relationships come in. Okay? Done the correct way, it looks the same, but it's coded to where you have the heading and then you have the information immediately after it. Sensory characteristics. Imagine if you're blind and your screen reader says, click the submit button on the left. Where are you going to go if you're a screen reader user? Before? Possibly. So that's confusing. Okay, here's one of the first 2.1, WCAG 2.1 items we have. Support personalization. So once again, the items that are in amber or orange, these are still being discussed. So there's nothing to do here. Basically, it's providing help me out, thank you, determinable content so that personalization is available. So it can be determined that this is personalization. As you could think of it, we don't have any tags that say this is personalization. We don't have any ARIA that says that this is personalization. Distinguishable. Make it easier for users to see and hear content, including separating foreground from background. Let's see, okay, we're doing pretty good. So this is going to be dealing a lot with contrast, but it's not just color. Okay, use of color, audio control, contrast minimum, resize text, images of text, contrast enhanced, low or no background audio, visual presentation, images of text, no exception. As you can imagine, that's a AAA item. New criteria, linearization, resizing content, graphics, contrast, printing. Can you imagine having to make sure that when you print a page, it's accessible? Haven't thought of that yet. User interface component contrast. Think about how many forms controls you have. Let's say form fields. You know, we just love to put the lightest shade of gray around that form field. Or maybe none. You know, I've seen that. That would hit upon that. Adapting text. Pop-up interference. You can imagine that's Amber. People are like, okay, what does that mean? Use of color. Okay. Color is not used as the only visual means of conveying information, indicating an action, prompting a response, or distinguishing a visual element. How many times, not recently, but how many times have we said, click the green button? This is a basic item, level A. Okay, here's where I get to have a little fun. So, what is the links? What are the links on this particular page? The text in blue? Okay. Now, let's just say that you have a form of color blindness to where you can't see blue. What's the link text? It's an issue. So this is simulated using a Chrome plugin called No Coffee Vision Simulator. It's so obviously the alternative to just using color alone would be to use underlines, which of course we all hate. But it's the basis of the web from 1992, 3, what? Yeah, something like that. Here's another one. So what's the regular rate and what's the member rate? It's very clear. It's all based on color. If we use the same premise, which is which? Okay, again, using the No Coffee Vision Simulator. Okay, audio control. I had really tried to get a good example of this, but I gave up. I have to admit. But basically, you know, and we don't have this as often now, thank God. I literally run into this about once a year now. But how many times have we gone to a website? Let's say you go to Beaches Resort website, and they would have, what's that song? And I had the time of my life. I think that was their running song for a while there. And there's no way to turn it off. Okay, really? That could be very irritating, especially at work. Now everyone knows, oh, they're on the Beaches website again. Contrast minimum. I'm not a numbers person, so I literally have to read out. I depend on tools when it comes to color contrast. So basically, as a minimum, color contrast, foreground to background. So think of it, text and to the background. You must have a color contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1. Okay, to be level AA compliant. There are nuances for large text. Large-scale text and images of large-scale text have a color contrast ratio of at least 3 to 1. Incidental text, text or images of text that are part of an inactive use. Okay, I'm just going to forget about that. That's getting too detailed. Logo types. So this is interesting. We always have a lot of people ask about, well, what about logos? If it's part of a logo, it's exempt from color contrast. Okay. I would say though, wouldn't you want your logo to pop? I always tell folks so. So here's a perfect example. So this is using what we call normal size text. This is, WCAG uses points. Can anyone show me a point on this screen? Go ahead, I'll wait. No, okay, I won't. There are no points, there's pixels. And nowadays we use M's and percentages. I've actually submitted feedback to have WCAG change from points to pixels. Because all that does is makes me have to go and perform the conversion. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. Text is less than 18 points or 24 pixels if not bold, and less than 14 points, 18 pixels if bold. So basically with these various shades of blue, both of these pass. The non-bold version fails, both fail. Okay, now you might ask, well, how do you know that offhand? So I do have an analyzer. Let's see if I can do this without messing everything up. Let's see here, get past the Kardashians. So this is a tool that actually I was told about called the WCAG color, the contrast checker. So basically it puts a side panel here, and you just use the eyedropper to select the foreground and background. If you can imagine, trying to get the white out of this, you know, is a little bit difficult. But as you see here, that combination passes for level AA, actually passes for AAA. If we change the background to this lighter one, you notice that now at this size it fails. And then obviously for the even lighter version, it all fails. Okay, if we go to the larger version, this is larger text, same sort of thing. We perform the test. It passes, it passes, it fails. United.com uses a fairly popular font called Open Sans. How many people use Open Sans in your work? Raise your hand. Okay, so decent representation. The lighter or thinner the typeface is, the more likely you're going to be out of compliance. And it's more of a perceptional thing. You know, you might say this background and this foreground, it actually matches. But because of the thinness, I can't tell you how many times I have to get up really close and say, I don't know. I just don't know. Okay. Oh, boy. Thanks for the time check. I appreciate that. Same thing here, ads. Just so you know, and I know these two duplicate. I forgot to get the third one. These all fail. Here's one of my favorites. When you place text over the image. Technically, this fails. And the reason why is, yes, I can read Superb Getaway, but I can't, this is failing right there. Okay, now there is a technique to improve things. So you could just put an overlay, which is fine. But you know what's one thing that a lot of people forget whenever you use, in this case, this is the background image. What happens if images are turned off? Get a white box. I mean, the text is there. So always, if you're using a background image, always use a background color. Resizing text. I'm not going to demo this, but basically in Firefox, so you know, nowadays we just zoom and everything sizes nicely. In Firefox, you can zoom just the text. What happens is now this text overlays this, and now you're failing 1.4.4. Yes? Did you have a question? Okay. Images of text. Don't use images of text. We got these font APIs left and right, so don't use that. Contrast enhanced. all the AAA stuff, I'm just going to blow right past this. You definitely can check this out. If you have audio, make sure that the foreground audio, if someone's speaking, don't have traffic with blowing horns blowing. You know, that'll be difficult. Visual presentation, AAA, I'm just going to go past this. Images of text, no exception. Here's the 2.1 things. Firefox has a setting to where you can linearize the page. So this way it's almost like an e-reader. And it just takes all the layout out and just linearizes the entire page. Okay, this is actually a proposed item, and this is going to be basic, which means your page must be able to be linearized. Resizing content. This is actually one that is fairly approved. Normally, the WCAG 2 specifications say you need to be able to zoom text by 200%. I've done user testing where people zoom by 500%. So this is actually getting closer to meeting users' needs. Graphics contrast. If you have a graphic that has foreground and background and there is things being communicated that's not text, this is where this would fall into play. Lots of details here. Printing. It has to be resized. So if you resize the screen, the text that you print must also be resized. Think about that. Changes reflected. If you make changes to the page, that you have the ability to make changes to the page, that printout must reflect those changes. This one is just a ton of stuff. Adapting text. I can't wait to see some of these. Pop-up interface. So tools that I did not cover in the and earlier in this presentation. The Wave browser extension, both for Chrome and Firefox. They stopped developing the one for Firefox because Firefox made some changes that basically made it, you know, impossible to maintain. Firefox then made changes that now allow them to continue development. The Wave browser extension is one of your baseline tools. You turn it on, it'll show you many of the errors. Now, any of these automated tools are only going to catch, on average, 30% of errors. Okay, just so you know. And as you begin to use it, you'll see things that it's missing. Okay. There's also the Axe tool, which is a free browser tool. Once again, you run this on a particular page. There's also Axe Core, which I know Seth has presented on during our lightning talks. And this can basically, as you're developing, it's checking, it's checking, it's checking. So it's a wonderful tool. And actually, Marcy Sutton, who's presenting next month, is one of the key contributors to that product. So.
Thanks to our speaker, Dennis Deacon. Thanks to our venue sponsor, Critical Mass. Visit them at criticalmass.com. Captions were provided by Alternative Communication Services. Visit them at acscaptions.com. Captions were sponsored by McDonald's. We're loving it. Thanks to Sticker Giant for providing our meetup stickers. Visit them at stickergiant.com. Thanks to Rosenfeld Media. Visit them at rosenfeldmedia.com and get 20% off really great books. Use code A11YCHI. Thanks to O'Reilly Media. Visit them at shop.o'reilly.com and get 50% off ebooks and 40% off print books with code PCBW. Video production and editing by Dennis Deacon. This has been a production of the Chicago Digital Accessibility and Inclusive Design Meetup. Visit us at meetup.com/A11YCHI. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/A11YCHI. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/A11YCHI. Follow us on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/groups/8463995.